Hey everyone, this is Lisa Campion, and this is Psychic Stories, where we share our spooky paranormal. Sometimes they're spooky, sometimes they're cool. Today it's spooky. Our paranormal stories and our psychic experiences. And today we're talking about a pretty chilling paranormal case known as the double murder investigation. And we have Rob Gutro with us. He is a paranormal investigator, medium, an author, the author of the case files of inspired ghost tracking. And Rob and his team from Ghost Tracking of Maryland investigated this home that had some pretty disturbing paranormal activity. There's some detailed insights, confirmations, photographic proof, and just goes to show you what happens when there's sort of a disturbance in the force and the past refuses to rest. So, welcome to the show. Welcome back. I've had you on my other podcast, and it's always such a pleasure to talk to you, Rob.
Nice to talk to you, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me.
So, tell us a little bit, just a minute about you, so people know who you are and what you do.
Well, I consider myself an average guy who just happens to be able to talk to dead people. But during the day, actually, I'm a scientist. I'm a meteorologist. So
Right.
I use my science background to explain the paranormal in terms of energy and how it works.
I love that. So cool. Yeah, I think having that blend of science lends some like credibility and believability to the things that we experience as psychics. So what story are we going to talk about today? It sounds like it was a pretty creepy one.
It absolutely is. It's one of the actually the first cases I did with Inspired Ghost Tracking in Maryland, and I called this the double murder ghost investigation. When we were called to this particular home, we were called by a family that was that was renting the home, and their children were experiencing things. They were seeing shadow figures. They were having sheets pulled off of their bed and so forth. They were feeling cold spots. Some just some very uncomfortable feelings. Um, so that was the basis for the call, and that call came into the manager of the group, who basically went over everything to make sure that it was a legitimate claim, and she did. And then she sent a technical team in. The mediums, of which I am one, went in second.
Hmm, interesting. What did the technical team discover?
Well, the technical team managed to get a photograph of a shadow figure in the hallway in the upstairs part of this split level rancher. And that was one of the places where this shadow figure, if you will, was seen.
Hmm,
So that was some photographic proof. Um, they were also able to get photographs in the basement, which will come into play as I unfold the story. And that particular photograph that they captured was an orb. An orb is the most simple form of uh, a ghost or spirit can take. Ghosts, for me, by the way, are earthbound. Spirits are the ones who have crossed over, like our
hmm,
grandmother or our puppies or kittens
right.
or so forth. So that orb comes into play as we go through. Um, but the mediums came in next, and that was that's where I came in, and I'm the guy that always writes the reports. So I had firsthand information about what would happen.
And what happened?
So when we first got there were two mediums. There's myself and another guy named Troy Klein, and he's this was really his big first case. Um, so when we got there, we wanted to actually explore the grounds first. We didn't feel like we wanted to go inside immediately. And what was interesting is that as a medium, you can also feel energy from the outside of a house as well. So I can drive by houses and I can tell which ones are haunted and which ones are not. That's something that's come over time, which
Mm.
is kind of crazy to me. But
Yep.
we walked around the house, found a white door um, that was on the side of what used to be a garage and is now a playroom. And Troy Troy touched that door, and he's very sensitive, and he felt like his hands were were bound together, and
Hmm.
he felt that there was a lot of really uh, tense energy. There's a lot of anxiety attached to that door. Now, there was an electrical box next to that, so we took our K2 meter, which measures electromagnetic energy, and that K2 meter didn't register anything, so we knew it was attached to the door. We kept that in mind as we walked around. Um, there were other things we found in the backyard, but they were disassociated from the ghost or ghosts that lay within. We finally went inside, and I was asked where I want to go, and I was drawn immediately to the basement. So this particular house, the split level rancher, also has a finished basement, and it looked like the basement had an apartment really of its own. Um,
Hmm.
so when we went down there, it, it's kind of a crazy setup because you get down to the bottom of the stairs, and to your left, there's a furnace room, and you walk through that furnace room to get to what used to be the garage, is now a playroom. In that furnace room, it felt like wading through a pool. The energy was so thick in there. You know when you're in a swimming pool and you start walking from one end to the other, and
Yeah.
you feel that
You're
pressure?
feeling that sort of like heavy gravity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it was. So, have you ever walked into a room where you felt that, like with living people in it, that
Oh, yeah, for sure. And you just know, like, somebody had a big fight there or something went down, something happened, and there's all that, like, thick residual energy that's left over, all that emotion and stuff. Yeah, for sure.
so that's exactly what we felt when we walked through that furnace room. And this furnace room is really short. I mean, when you think about how big is the furnace, it's like 3 feet maybe wide or 4 feet wide, and
Right.
that was basically the length of this tiny little corridor. Um, so we knew something weird had happened there to imprint this residual emotional energy on the walls. Um, so let me backtrack for just a second. One of the most important parts of mediums going in is that we did not want to know anything about this house. In
Right.
fact, the the manager called us 1 hour before we were supposed to be there and gave us the address.
Wow.
And
That's amazing. So you couldn't do any prior research, you couldn't look it up on Google, you couldn't Google it at all, like, yeah, nothing. That's good. That's some good science there, right? A little double blind. Yeah.
it definitely was a double blind, pun intended, thing, considering there's a double murder. But yeah, and what's interesting is that um, the other medium had to come up from Washington D.C. toward Baltimore, and it took him almost exactly an hour to get there. So
Mm.
he just got the address in time to be there for the investigation. Um,
Wow.
so we didn't know. Again, we didn't know anything. The family had left, so it was just us in the house.
Mhm.
Um, and once we get down into that basement, here's where it started to get weird. Troy started to sense the presence of a woman, as did I. Now, Troy was on one side of the room, I was on the other side of the room. And this is a playroom where kids played all the time because there were a lot of toys. It used to be actually the people that had it, they made it into a daycare center.
I see.
So that's kind of
Yeah.
creepy to me because, ultimately we found, as I mentioned, we found two ghosts in there. And, and as children have the ability to
Children are so sensitive. The poor kids are playing in the super haunted daycare room. Yikes.
and they're like, who are these women? So, yeah. So that's pretty scary. And, um, it took a while to figure out who the women were, uh, and I will get through that. Couple of things happened when we were in that room. First of all, we felt the temperature change. We felt the temperature get colder. Now,
Mhm.
ghosts ghosts are well known to make cold spots, and scientifically, I explain that as a meteorologist. Because fast moving molecules of air are warm air, slower moving molecules of air are cooler air. And the ghost absorbs the energy from those molecules of air, slowing them down. That creates
Yeah.
the cool spot where they are.
Well, I think so too. And I think sometimes we feel cold around around them because they absorb our energy. They can take our life force energy and then they use that to manifest, to move things around or to create an apparition. Or I also think sometimes they can use electrical energy. That's why they take, why your lights might flicker. That's why they can use the energy of lightning. And that's why it's always a dark, stormy night. Like that lightning flashes and then the ghost is there. So I think they need a little boost of of electromagnetic energy in order to manifest. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So my whole theory is based on energy. So I think that they can use different kinds of physical energies like heat, light,
Mhm.
water, and electricity.
Yep.
And as you mentioned, lightning is hotter than the sun. It's 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's an incredible amount of energy. Fortunately, it was not lightning that day, but um, but they had enough. Plus, I found that earthbound ghosts also can use negative emotional energy like fear and
Mm,
anxiety, depression and anger. And then they emit
yep.
those energies and cause the people in the house to feel those things.
Yeah. Especially empaths and sensitive people, right? And to me, like that was always like they're feeling all this turmoil and then they kind of like, this is how I'm feeling. And then they push it on us. And sometimes like I know if I'm not really afraid. I'm never been afraid of ghosts, but sometimes I'll get really scared and I think, oh, that's how this person was feeling, you know? So always have to ask, is it me that's feeling that? Or is that the sort of empathic vibe I'm picking up from the spirit, the ghost that's there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually, yeah, it's really something that we have to kind of figure out. And ghosts have been known to share their emotions with me, but also their
Mhm.
pain of death.
Yeah, me
And
too.
that's a yeah,
It's always
that's
fun. I swear I know how it feels to die in like hundreds of different ways, you know? Yeah.
yeah, me too.
I
And
talked to once a ghost that was electrocuted. I found that to be extremely unpleasant. Don't be electrocuted. Yeah, that was really unfun. Yeah.
wow. Yeah, no, I'll skip that one, thank you. I did have a ghost when I visited England, share how he died by putting a sword right through my left side.
Oh,
Yeah,
bummer.
that was painful. It
Yeah.
drove me to my knees physically in the middle of a a a castle courtyard.
Wow.
And everybody was looking at me
Fascinating.
like, "Did he have an
What
attack?"
happened there? Those American tourists, they're always falling down.
"No, nothing to see here, just a dead person." So
So what did you feel in this going back to this case, what were you feeling in this instance?
so over the course of this investigation, what lasted a couple of hours, um, I I felt a number of different physical feelings. I was hit, I was punched, I was pushed down the stairs. I
Mm,
actually went when I went upstairs to investigate something, to investigate the first floor, I felt like I was pushed down the stairway,
mm.
and hit my head. Um, when I went back down in the basement with Troy, I felt as if I was shot.
Wow.
Yes, I was shot, in the lower part of the body, and then stabbed. And these and on top of this, the one of the women was assaulted
Mm,
during all of this.
oh my god.
Um, so those are the sensations I got, and as I was explaining these, it was horrific to me. So Troy, I was talking to Troy, and I finally said to Troy, um, "What do you think this is?" And he said it could be a domestic thing.
Mhm,
Um,
domestic violence. Yep.
yeah, and I was thinking
Mhm.
the same thing, but when I asked him about who he was speaking to, he said he was sensing a younger woman in her 30s. And he said, "Isn't that who you're talking to?" And I said, "No, no, no. I'm communicating with an older woman in her 60s, and she's tall and thin, and she has dark brown hair." Um, and um, and I asked the woman to give me a clue as to her identity. And what she showed me in my mind was that she was behind a counter and she was chopping up vegetables, like serving food.
Mm,
Um, it turned out once we got the police report that there was an older woman. She was actually 70, and she worked in a tavern, a bar, um,
hmm.
doing food. So
Wow.
that was the woman that I connected to.
Fascinating. Yeah, so you got some good confirmation there.
The other thing we learned after the investigation was that there was also a woman in her 30s that was one of the victims. And
Mm,
she was the daughter in law of the
mm,
woman who was also murdered. Um,
wow.
and Troy got Troy got the first letter of her name that uh, was was the connected to the younger woman. And all of these. So after we did the investigation, Margaret, who was the manager, got the police report, and she was able to verify every single thing that we got from all of the different ways they were assaulted to what they did for work, what had happened, um, and just everything. And that was mind blowing. Um,
Mm,
so there were a couple of other things in this investigation that were really eye opening. When we walked into the downstairs apartment bedroom. And it turns out that's where the children were sleeping. And
mm.
Troy sensed a very deep sadness there. Um, he felt an overwhelming emotional energy of a woman crying. And we later learned that one of the residents had been awakened several times by a shadow figure standing right at that bed and pulling the covers off.
Right.
So these two ghosts were following us around and trying to tell us their story. Here's here's something visually that was horrific. And you would think that if somebody was renting a house, that they would pull up a carpet that was stained. They did not.
Oh
The
my god.
carpet,
So there were blood stains?
it was big bleach stain. So
Blah.
after the murderer, who I will tell you who at the end, who it was, and what became of him. Um, After he did his deeds, he used bleach to try and get rid of the blood stains, and that carpet was still there. And I thought, this is
Oh my
really
god,
this,
that's pretty sick.
yeah,
And no wonder it's so haunted. I really believe, like, that blood is such a psychoactive, substance. You know, it holds our life force energy, it holds the imprint of who we are, um, so deeply, and then I feel like what I notice is when blood is spilled somewhere and not properly cleaned up, and I mean, like, maybe blessed or sanctified or, like, all that, it can create, ongoing, psychic disturbance and also maybe create portals. I've seen it, like, that's why battlefields, that's why places where a lot of blood has been spilled in my this is just my personal experience, can attract other entities. So, sometimes that blood opens a gate to some not so good things.
yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, if you read all if you read all these horror novels and so forth, they always use blood for rituals
Right.
and everything. And by the way, I can't read horror novels. I just can't do it. Um,
Yeah.
I It's enough for me to talk to dead people.
I mean, I got it. Like, we're dealing with enough of this stuff that actually really happened. I don't watch, like, murder stuff either, true crime. I can't take it because we're dealing with the real our side of the real thing, how on from our perspective, totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So once we left that bedroom, by the way, in the downstairs, we walked back into that playroom, and in that playroom where immediately sensed that we were talking to the two different women that we learned were different. Therein was the white door.
Mm.
Um, what we Troy went back to the white door and he put his hand on it and he felt the same energy that he felt on the outside. Um, and uh, so we went back toward the furnace room again, and we felt that um, the women, these two women, were pulled through the furnace room against their will.
Hmm.
If one of them was still alive. Um, Ultimately, what happened was that, and we learned this from the police report, that there was a man who was renting out the basement of this basement apartment, and he had a drug problem. And the woman that owned the house was the 70-year-old woman. Her daughter-in-law had come over to visit. This man was apparently on a drug fueled frenzy. He came up
Wow.
the stairs. He beat them both, pushed the 70-year-old woman down the stairs, and that's when I felt.
Right.
Then he proceeded to take out weapons and do those horrible things to them. Um, he he killed one in that open space where that big blood stain was covered up,
Hmm.
and the other one was still apparently living, and he dragged them both through that furnace room,
Wow.
which is why that furnace room was just loaded with residual energy of fear.
Right.
He dragged them through that room, that playroom, and through the white door.
Mm.
And that's why the white door also had that horrible energy. And apparently, he must have bound up the hands of the one that was still alive,
Mhm, and that's why
because
you
that's
got
what Troy
the
was
hand
feeling
binding
too.
feeling. Yeah.
So yeah,
Oh.
so this is just totally horrific. Um, Ultimately, what he did was he took both of these women and put them in the trunk of a car that belonged to one of them, and he drove to a nearby apartment parking lot where they both died in the back, in the trunk.
Mm.
Um, so that is
Such a
the
sad story.
it's tragic. It's absolutely horrible. Um, so there are two other aspects of this. One, um, we learned that the man was caught
Mm.
and he's doing a double life sentence with no chance for parole in Western Maryland.
Wow. Wow.
So they knew who it was. Um, Two, um, are when we analyzed the photographs that the tech team had taken the week before. That's when we looked at that orb, and in the top of that orb, we zoomed in on it. And my husband, who's also a paranormal investigator with us, was able to see the face, clearly a face, eyes, nose, mouth, lips, and so forth. I think I said that to you, didn't I?
No. No.
I did not. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to send it
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, send it to me.
It's
Yeah, I
chilling.
wanna see it. We'll post it on the podcast if you send it. Yeah.
And you can clearly see the face of a woman there,
Wow.
and that's what's really chilling.
So amazing. And so, Rob, so what happened to the spirits of those people? Were you able to help them move along?
Good question. So in every investigation, we really do try to cross them over because we want
Mm.
them to achieve peace. But
Yeah.
these two women were they were very determined to stay behind to ensure that this does not happen to anybody else.
Mm.
Now, we didn't get the police report until afterward. So when we left, they would not cross over.
Yeah.
Because we still didn't know, we didn't have any confirmations about who these women were or what happened and so forth. So once we got the police report, we tried to go back in, but the house was sold
Interesting.
and we could not go back in again.
Wow.
So they opted to stay behind because they wanted to protect the next people that stayed in the house. They obviously knew they were dead.
Hmm.
And so this is a really,
Yeah.
really tragic story. And it was horrific. I mean, the things that they endured. Um,
I found there's certain spirits, there's, like nothing's more stubborn than a stuck dead person than a stubborn stuck ghost. And you can't force them to move on. You can't like some of them like "Oh, did you know you were dead? Oops, I didn't know that," or I just am lost. I can't find the way," you know? So many of them, I think we can shift them, we can help them, we can cross them over, and then there are ones that just refuse to do that, and then there's no forcing that. You can't force that to happen. Then you just sort of have to wait until they I think some things help, like I'd certainly tear up that rug and maybe the floor underneath it. I'd certainly, like, maybe have a blessing ceremony in that house. Like, if you're religious, you call your priest or your pastor or your Buddhist monk or whoever to come in, or a feng shui practitioner, or, a psychic to come in and like, clear and bless the space. That can help. But there are just certain ones that just don't no matter what you do, they're not gonna go until maybe time moves on or, eventually they let go. But, yeah, I don't think you can force them,
so,
or we shouldn't
so
try. I mean
yeah, I totally agree. I always tell people that crossing people over is like being a salesperson because you really have to
yeah.
sell it. You have
Yeah,
to
you
sell
do.
the other side.
Yes.
um, and and the ones that I found are most stubborn, if you will, are actually the ones that tend to be more dedicated, if you will, or more conservative in their religious beliefs, because they
Yes.
really fear going to the other side.
So's Catholic ghosts. If you thought if you were gonna if you were naughty and you were gonna go to hell for all of eternity, would you go? You know? Like that. And when I was doing I don't do, clearings anymore, but I did them for about 10 years, and I did them in the '90s, so nobody was doing it. There were no paranormal TV shows. I was on my own. I did it every mistake in the book. Like, I just started because somebody was like it was a realtor, a friend of mine who's a realtor, and she's like, "I can't sell this house. Would you?" She's like she knew I was working as a psychic. She's like, "Could you come over and clear the house?" And I was like, "Sure. Yeah, sure. Why not?" I had no, 0 clue about what I was doing, and I got into a lot of trouble. Like, so much trouble in the years that I did it. Saw some really bad stuff, and, brought some home with me. I got really sick.
Oh,
It was pretty rough for a minute. Um, but I learned a lot. So, I mean, I appreciate the learning. But yeah, um, but I used to carry like like the Catholic blessing, like the rite of extreme unction, the last rites. And I would like pretend I was a priest and like do that whole thing because sometimes the Catholics they wouldn't go if they hadn't been blessed by a priest. Would you if you thought you were going to go to hell forever?
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You know, right? Yeah, yeah. Or people, the other ones I think sometimes stick are the total agnostics, people who think they're just gonna disappear into nothingness, and
Mhm.
they don't believe in the afterlife at all. I think they sometimes hold on.
Yeah, I will agree with that too. And so I come at it as a couple of I come at it and tell people from the scientific perspective that about the law of energy, that it can't be destroyed, it
Yeah,
has to be transformed, and that you're stuck here and this is not where you belong because you are supposed to be free floating energy. And
yeah.
it is difficult to convince people that there is not a hell. There it's it's all peace and acceptance and just energy on the other side. Um, but sometimes what we do in spirit is the group that I belong to, we will have like 4 or 5 people combine their emotional energies. Now, I don't know how
Mm.
you did it as one person because that is
It's really dangerous. You should never do it with only one person. It's really dangerous.
well, you
So
might get
I
wiped out, right?
yeah,
Emotionally.
totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I only did it until I learned it's not a good idea, and then I had a team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so we always had 4 or 5, and, um, we would pool our emotional energies, focus on a point in the room, open a light to the other side, and sometimes we would try to connect the energy of the ghost to the energy of someone related to them in spirit
Yeah,
as a
yes.
way to sell it to them so that we didn't have to, because 'cause we're complete strangers with them.
Just look up, like, you're look up and see your mom. Your mom's in heaven. She's reaching down her hand. Grab her hand, like, sometimes that works.
Yeah, your mom's saying, "Stop being so
Yeah.
stubborn."
Your mom's waiting for you. Get over there.
Um,
Yeah.
Sometimes even pets. I would call pets to come for a person that they have
That's
a
nice.
childhood pet. Um, and,
Cool. That's beautiful.
who wouldn't follow a dog, right?
Yeah, totally. Because you trust it. You
I
trust they're so trusted. Well, sadly, Rob, we're running out of time. I wish we could talk forever because there's so much we could keep talking about, but I want to give you a chance to share where people can find your book. What book is this in? How do they reach you if they wanna know more about your work?
Okay. So this is in Case Files of Inspired Ghost Tracking, and everything's on Amazon. Just type in Gutro, Gutro. Um, my website is the same, robgutro.com, or if you can't spell my name, petspirits.com. And you'll
Awesome.
find me all over social media like an epidemic.
Cool. Love it. Yeah, your work is solid. I really like, what you know and how you go about it and, so much compassion. And I think sometimes the ghost hunters in paranormal teams, they have more of an agenda around proving than they do around helping. So I think both are important, like I think it's really good to have both. So I appreciate your caring spirit,
Thank you.
um, and all the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again and see you.
I know. Yes, me too. You have to come back and tell some more stories sometime because there's so much you could talk about. I want to hear about the ones that happened in England. That sounds really neat too.
Okay. Sounds good.
Great.
Thank you,
And
Lisa.
thanks all of you guys for tuning in to Psychic Stories. And I hope you will subscribe and we'll see you again with even more stories. So stay tuned.